my Nutty Pot Limit Omaha journey. This is hand number 1 of day number 3, and, it's garbage, so we'll put it there. So let's see, what's the plan for today? Play about an hour, mark some hands as we go along. Please feel free to say, hey, that hand where you had the 8875, can you mark that hand? I want to know why you overlimped in the small blind. Now, this is a position where I'm not going to do, I might do too much limping, right? We want to try to avoid that. I think doing some is fine and probably correct. A hand like this, I could have raised. I think it's too strong to fold. So, I overlimped because it was kind of in that middle range where I didn't feel like raising. I was going to really get a lot of value on the money that went in. But, one thing about raising is we build a little bigger pot, and in pot limit, that means we can bet more on each street. Now, my opponent over here, who is the limper and looks like a fine person to have at the table, has only 30 bucks. The raiser has only about, 40 bucks before the raise. I don't think this would be a good 3-betting hand against a raiser and 2 limpers. It's kind of a weaker king's hand. In fact, I'm contemplating folding. The 3 is a fairly poor card. It feels like it's probably too tight, though, to fold. So, yeah, anyway. I think I probably can play it, but it doesn't really feel good, If I knew that these other people were all going to fold, do I want to get it in on a board like this with a 3-to-1 SPR, meaning there's 3 times as much money in the effective stack, which is my opponent's stack, as there is in the pot? Probably not, but maybe. So I think it would have been, if we'd been heads up. In a multi-way pot, I'd say definitely not. Now I have kings again. Slightly worse kings, I think, but the situation's very different. There's somebody who's limped in, and nobody's raised ahead of me. So I'm going to go ahead and raise these kings. I do have one suit. Having a suit matters, and having a king-high suit, particularly matters. Now, if I'm going to get a big multi-way pot, not as helpful to potentially make the second nuts, right? I'd kind of hope that ace of clubs comes if I catch 3 clubs. Because there's just, when this player calls, there's 12 cards in against me, so there's a pretty good chance one of them has the ace of clubs. Now I'm more concerned about someone having a queen with either an ace or a 9. And generally, I think on a board like this, where there's so many straight possibilities, I want to be checking. The fact that I have the flush draw to go with it leads me to believe maybe I can put a value bet out here. I have the 9, which is nice. It technically gives me a straight draw, where if a queen comes, I have a straight, but it's not really a good straight draw, right? Then anybody with an ace and another Broadway card would have a better straight. So here I can either try and get in potentially against somebody with a made straight, maybe get it in good, but I'm going to call. I have tons of equity for calling, and I'm probably going to, call on the turn. Well, I'm definitely going to call on the turn as well, right? I'm getting 2-to-1, and I'm going to have 10 outs to, a boat type thing, plus another number of outs to a flush. Now I have a second nut flush, which is tricky. Second nut's out of position. Can I bet? I could try and put out a blocker bet here. I'm not going to do that. I feel like if my opponent has, I think I should have though, probably, right? When they check back the turn, I think they don't have ace queen with anything, right? They just don't have ace queen. So it's not like they're value betting something like a straight. I haven't seen anything from this person so far. I think I've severely under-repped my hand. If they have the ace of clubs with some other random stuff, I think they can bluff here. It's I feel like people usually have the nuts here, but they might not. And I've basically gone check, call, check, check. So I think I'm way at the top of my range, and I'm going to go ahead and call. And get some more chips. And getting it in on the flop against a hand like that would have been quite the EV bonanza. I think that's a very interesting hand, and I'm going to mark it for review. All right, King Jack 6-4. Just going to go ahead and pitch that one straight away. Yeah, and so I think, you know, hands like that, where basically every decision on every street, well, the turn, I think checking the turn was pretty straightforward, but where every decision feels questionable, and maybe you make a river call on the river that, oops, whoa, okay, that's a misclick. You make a call on the river that, like, doesn't feel good, right? Because it feels like, oh, you're just putting money in with zero equity when they have the flush. But I think learning to kind of let go of those while you're playing, like during the session, to just kind of let it go, I think is very important, right? Just go to the next hand. And that's part of the value of marking a hand for review, because you know, like, oh, I'm definitely going to review that hand later, so I don't have to worry about it now, right? If it's something that was good or bad or whatever, something that could have done something differently, maybe check jam the flop, right? Get the money in really good instead of really bad on the river. You know, maybe we can learn something from bet sizing or whatever, but since it's marked, I know I can trust that I'm going to learn whatever there is to learn from it later. So I don't really have to sweat it right now. Here, you know, 5-6 is a reasonable part of what somebody might have. The person limped in early positions, so you'd think small cards like that might be a little less present. But, you know, again, they limped. If this ace is suited, I think this is pretty close. Without the suited ace, it's pretty much garbage. So we shall put it there. There was some beeping. What was that? What was that? I don't know. Right then. The player on our left has open raised. So I'm going to try and do a better job of observing the hands I'm not in today. I think when you're single tabling, it's a great habit. It can, first of all, you can get really good reads on opponents, and second of all, you can learn, you know, about the sort of the rhythm of play, and it's a way to stay focused. So here, the raiser is going to have all the combos of ace-ace, which the cold caller will either have none or very few of. So that's a board where I think the in-position player is going to bet a lot. Yes, there are a lot of straight draws potentially available, but I think that's pretty good board for in-position. All right, who opens again? I am going to go double check what exact cards they had in that hand. Let's see. Only because, all right, ace 7-7-3 with a suited ace. So, you know, I think that's a little bit of a loose cold call. So, maybe it's good in what's going to be a big multi-way pot on the button. You know, being on the button's nice. If they weren't on the button, the hand might have played fairly differently. But yeah, I think it's maybe a little loose, probably. All right, so we have the pre-flop race, 3 callers. So we can see this table so far looks very active, right? We have 3 players who've limped in so far, and the player on our left is doing a fair amount of, you know, aggressive action. The button bets half pot on this board. What are they repping? I think they can have a lot of king and, you know, 3 unpaired cards. They can have all the 2-pair combinations, maybe all the sets if they're not 3-betting, you know, some kings, bad kings, I think can just flat there. This hand, I will open raise in the small blind if it folds to me. It's not all that good. Having the ace and the king suited is, I mean, we want the suited ace, but we don't want to have the king with it because we want someone to make the second nuts and pay us off, as we've seen can be profitable. So what do we have? Very slow action so far. If there's a raise, this is a clear fold. And I think if these players limp, I need to decide, like, do I want to play a fair number of hands over limping? Or do I want to, like, if this player limps, I'm very tempted to try to isolate, but they raised, so nothing really to think about there. Very straightforward. But I do, it's a little bit of an awkward spot where if I raise, am I going to get a lot of three-way pots out of position? On this board, I'd be fairly happy with my hand. I mean, Ace King is, I think, more powerful than I would initially give it credit for, though I think most Hold'em players would give it too much credit, right? But it's not garbage. Here, turning an open ender would be nice. The button, the actual action in this hand, the button c-bet, and then they bet the turn. Deuce 5 is the nuts. The big blind could have something like that, some kind of double suited hand with a deuce and a 5. I think deuces don't get played that often because they're truly awful cards. And just it very rarely contributes to a good hand, although in that hand it would have been part of the nuts. And this is a hand where I think I probably would have open folded anyway because the 4 is just such a tragic card. But if the 4 were like a 7, I almost certainly open raise the button, even single suited. But with the limper, it's just not the sort of hand that I think is going to play well, in a multi-way pot, because I'm basically playing with 3 cards and everybody else is playing with 4. Or, maybe they're playing with 3 because they're playing with a deuce or a tray, but not a great situation. Okay, so we have is that an open raise? No, this is a raise from the big blind, right? The big blind went ahead and potted it against the limper. I'd say the out of position player probably has more flushes because the in position player is a little bit more likely to semi-bluff with them. But either player really could have some, whatever kind of flushes, except not jack high or 10 high. And this bet of $1, what were they doing? They were betting top pair, top kicker, and basically just trying to get a cheap showdown, which they did. Which, if I had made a really small bet, like a blocker bet with my king high flush, the idea would have been to try to get calls from weaker flushes. I was concerned that a hand like the nut flush, obviously the nut flush is going to raise me, and that's fine. I can just fold, but I was concerned that they were going to raise with just the ace of clubs, just the blocker there. And so you don't really want to set yourself up to get bluffed. But the more I think about it, the less likely the ace of clubs actually seemed. So I think that kind of smaller blocker bet makes more and more sense. This board, couple limpers. This first limper seems to be the person we're most interested at the table. I'm going to go ahead and promote them to a little green HUD outline, suggesting that, we want to play pots with them and we are, interested in staying at the table so long as they are. Pretty good turn card for my hand. I turn a flush and the nut house. But as far as what anybody else has, are people going to start betting flushes here? Maybe. Maybe not. So this bet is a little eyebrow raising. It's like, did you make a flush and you're betting it? Or you have pocket fours? If you have a 7, you probably would have bet the flop, which they didn't. And then here in the cutoff, I would say I'm going to open raise this hand. In earlier position, I would fold it. But I have 3 cards that are nicely connected, the 9, the 7, and the 6. Yes, the gap is towards the top, so they're not wonderfully connected, but, nicely. And I have a nut suit. Yes, I have a third of that suit, which isn't great when I have the nut suit particularly. But it's still a potential, ace high flush I can make. And I'm blocking all the straight flushes. Nobody can make a straight flushes when you have 8, 6, 9. So this board is just terrible for my hand. I have nothing. I'm going to check. And if they bet, I'm going to fold. And I'm streaming with delay, so they're not going to know what I have by, like, you know, checking it out on, following on Twitch. And yeah, as I said, I'm going to fold. But first I want to top off so that I have a full stack and then fold. Particularly because, so topping off, some people are like, oh, you must top off every single time. And like, yeah, okay, whatever. It generally, you probably want to be topping off habitually, just make it a habit. But in the case where, like, if these three players with the 7, the 26, and the 56 were the only players who were like bad, then there's not that much utility to topping off, because like you're just going to build bigger pots against you're going to, sorry, I got distracted by a thing. I'll be right back to that thought. Yeah, you don't really like make most of your money from strong players, right? I mean, you can make money, but at this table, if we look at it, my opponent here, who's just cold called, they're the person that I said, okay, I most want to play hands with this person. Well, they've got 140, so I want to have at least 100. I can always have at least 100, and over time, hopefully, I'll get more and more so that I can potentially stack them, right? We make money in PLO by people making big errors. Okay, so this hand, we have an open raise, a cold call with ace, queen, deuce, tray. Ace, queen, deuce, tray is a pretty good hand with the suited ace, right? So that was a pretty reasonable hand to want to play, but against a raiser who had such a short stack, it was a little bit of an odd spot. So I don't think it was, I mean, honestly, like, the fact that they're playing 54% of their hands is a bigger indicator than the fact that they cold called with that hand. That was a pretty reasonable hand. If you're going to cold call a few too many hands, that's the sort that, you know, you could have be in the few too many. This hand here, I've got pocket jacks. I've got a queen high flush, which is like and I've got queen jack, right? Which I can make Broadway and I can make top set. And that's basically what I'm going for here. If I pick up a queen high flush draw, having the flush cards not match the pair means that a jack of diamonds, like half the time that I flop a set, I'll have at least one card to my flush. And I can flop a flush in a set, or I can flop a flush draw in a set, or at least have that backdoor. So that's nice, but like the queen high flush is kind of, you know, flush draw that's kind of this like additional nice factor to the hand. Mostly I've got a pair of jacks and I've got a couple of players who I think if I set overset them will probably pay me off with a stack. So for 50 cents, it seems like a pretty clear call. Now the board is 10-7-4, and in Hold'em you might be thinking, oh, I have an overpair. In PLO you have a garbage. It's just, you know, 4 ways, out of position, none of my suit, you know, a flush draw in the wrong suit that I'm not even blocking. It's just a very bad situation. They potted the flop, right? And then they're making this small bet here, which makes me feel like maybe they have some kind of a draw, or maybe they have like a 10, right? Maybe they bet something like a 10, but it feels to me like some kind of draw that knows that putting a lot of money in on a paired board with that draw is bad. Okay, so they had a 10. 10-4 though makes a ton of sense, right? They flop 2 pair, top and bottom, middle pair paired. All of a sudden their bottom pair is garbage. So they made this little blocking bet, and we're going to make a note about that. All right, so here with the limper, I'm going to fold. If it had folded to me, I think this is potentially a raise. What is this? Blocking bet on turn with counterfeit 2 pair. Okay. So that's, you know, I think that's the sort of thing that's of significance, because then that's a player that maybe we go, okay, maybe I want to raise that person when they make these little blocker bets, or maybe I want to call with a hand that I'm like, this isn't great, but I think I can beat what they're, you know, I don't think they're like trying to like suck the little bits of value out. Let's see, we've got a couple of comments. Having you pay attention to and comment on the hands you are not in is really helpful. Good, I'm glad. It's helpful for me as well. I'm going to fold this. I would have opened it if it folded to me. I think it's just really good to focus as much as you can. and learn from every piece of data, right? Don't draw huge reads based on small things. Like, I saw that person do this one thing that tells me this person might do this thing, right? It doesn't tell me this person always does this thing in a spot like that. And then also from The Ethical Panda, who, by the way, is, I believe, going to stream some of the same game, but at smaller stakes at, let me say, 7 p.m. Pacific time. So right when I'm watching Jeopardy, thanks. I'll tune in afterwards, though, and kibitz. Okay. This, like, I really don't like folding this here. It was hard to vocalize my thought process because it wasn't that um coherent, really, right? It was more of like a feel. It was like, I want to play this hand. This hand isn't very good. Why do I want to play this hand? I want to play this hand because the big blind isn't very good. I want to play hands with them. And there's a limper, and there's all this money, kind of, deadish money. Ultimately, because I was in the hijack and there's two players left to act who can be behind me and raise, I decided to fold it. I think playing it could have been okay. I had a suit. The 7 connects to the jack and the 4 connects to the 7. So I think maybe let's mark that for pre-flop and give that one a little more thought later. Okay. So we see an open raise from this player who did post in the cutoff, but we don't want to draw too much of a conclusion from that. Let's see. Is it possible to increase the size of the HUD boxes a bit? They're a bit hard to read. Tell me about it. Unfortunately, I have not found a way to increase the font in the HUD panels. If anybody out there, either on Twitch or on YouTube, is aware of how to increase the font in the HUD panels, I should just go into the forums on Poker Tracker. Poker Tracker is the piece of software that I'm using to download the hand histories so that I have a record of all the hands I played so I can easily review them later. It also lets me display, have this heads up display, the HUD, which shows, the statistics, the percentage of times players at the table have done particular things, which is of a little bit of utility in a game like this where everybody's anonymous, but is even higher utility in a game where you get to play lots of hands with people. So there will be a link in the video description if anybody wants to check out Poker Tracker. I highly recommend it. Let's see, King 10 9 7 with a suit. I think this is the sort of thing where I'd be playing too many hands if I play this. Against a later position player, I would play it. With the king suited, it would be a little bit nicer, but as it is, I think it's fold. This is like a skip straight. Basically, I'm hoping for some odd cards on the flop, like a 7 and a 9, a 9 and a jack, and we get raised, which I feel like we kind of get punished for playing this passively here. If we're going to put in the 50 cents, do we put this in? We're getting 3-1 now. Before we were getting 5-1. I think I can just let it go, actually. And I don't actually want to try to justify this decision by the previous decision. In Limit Hold'em, whenever you limp the small blind, then you're going to be getting the same odds if the big blind raises. And everybody calls, which they do because it's Limit Hold'em. And it's the correct play if they were already in. Cool. Yes. Thank you for the update. Yeah, 9 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, and in the wee hours Euro time. Yeah, so Poker Tracker, very helpful. Unfortunately, I don't know of any way to make the HUD panels larger with a larger font. I've looked into it before, and I really would like to. So if anybody out there has that information, send it along. And I'll make a note. What's the note? HUD panels, larger font, question mark. Okay. I have a pair, I have a connector, I have a suit, I have another card that connects. Like, I've got 3-card, 1-gapper, and I'm the button. Life is good. Everybody folded, which is a perfectly fine result. I think, when we raise the button and everybody folds, that's usually the best result for our given hand. And I'm going to fold this with the Dangler. I think the 3 is a very poor card, and I am going to mark this hand as it's just a very straightforward, like, hey, do I play this or do I not play this? On the button, I'm going to open this. Not certain that that's correct, but I think so. So, yeah. Oh, yeah, did I say where? Yeah, so The Ethical Panda. It should be in the chat. The Ethical Panda. Go ahead and give a follow on Twitch and check it out. They're more of a not newer player, as in like learning the rules kind of thing, but more of a newer PLO player in terms of like trying to study the game. They also do a lot of chatting about different topics like folding Queen 10 8 6 in the hijack, and I actually this very dear friend of mine who I often podcast with. You could go to theethicalpanda.com also and check out some podcasts where I make my very controversial opinions known. And there's lots of great stuff there, often on like pop culture content, mostly they call it geeky media, which is a term I'm not really fond of, but it's what a lot of people say. And kind of sci-fi, fantasy, superhero genre media. Genre. Yeah, okay. I might have spent hours listening, really just minutes, listening to Alex Trebek say genre in, what's it called? Oh, hey. Right, nothing like a 3-bet to bring you back to the action. So this player's new, right? That's what this N says. It says they just sat down at the table and they're like, how about 15? No thanks. No thank you. Nope. No. No. We still have our friend over here with the $160 stack now. They're down to like a 35 VPIP, so they're only playing about a third of their hands. And this is the first hand they've raised. And, like, this hand feels close-ish. I mean, very clear open. And, oh, this player open limped now, so there may be going to be some action. I'm going to fold, and I don't love it. If the player raising, I knew how to... I mean, them having a tight raising range is actually maybe good. Like, if I know that they have aces, then having a hand like 7, 6, 6, 4, like, if I spike a 6, maybe I get a stack, right? Because if they always have an overpair, and if they're going to overvalue that overpair. So I think this is interesting. If the 4 was a 5 or an 8, I think I'd probably play it. Being double suited is nice, but in this scenario, I'm very likely to be multi-way, right? Because there's a limper and then a raiser, and then if I call, the limper's probably going to call, and the blind's going to be like, ooh, is this a big pot? Let's play this big pot. And, a 7 high flush draw, 6 high flush draw, not the best in a multi-way pot. Much better to have those kind of draws or those hands in a heads-up situation. Alrighty. Ace, King, Jack, 4, not fantastic, but potentially pretty good. Much better if the ace is suited. Again, we have a limper here, so... Am I gonna... Alright, I just looked at this yesterday. It was a suited ace that someone was asking me about. If, basically folding this in the cutoff against a limper. And I actually think they probably should have played it because they're suited to the ace and they had a 5. Here I have a 4 and I'm suited to the king. So this is definitely worse than that hand, which I think was kind of close-ish. So if you're definitely worse than something that's close, then you're probably a fold. Having said that, raising this hand probably isn't terrible. If this limper had still had that 50 or 60 VPIP, I'd be trying to isolate a little wider. If the players behind me were going to be a little tighter, in this hand we see the big blind. They've played both their hands, including one for a limp and one for a 3-bet. Oh, okay, so they have that. So they limped queens, right? They limped queens. Let's go ahead and play it. When you have a weaker player in the big blind, if something's close, like that's one way actually to kind of shift your range, right? If you get a sense of what the close hands are, then you can know, okay, this hand's on the cusp. What's the situation around me? Oh, I have a player in the big blind that I'd like to play hands with. Okay, I'm gonna play my cuspy hands, right? Oh, I've got an aggressive player behind me. I'll let this one go. Here I have bottom two pair, out of position and kind of in this middle position. I'm gonna check. It's bottom two pair is a very vulnerable hand. Now this, if I had like ace 10 or ace 7, I'm gonna have all the ace ace combinations. So the fact that somebody's betting 3/4 pot, despite the fact that I'm the one who should have all the ace ace, I mean I check, so I probably don't, right? I'm just gonna fold bottom two pair. It's just, I mean, that's obviously a horrible card for bottom two pair because now I just have middle pair with a king kicker. There's so many draws I can get there. I think there's a chance that my hand's good. Well, probably not. This person probably called with an ace. You know, very likely somebody has a nut flush draw on the flop when two people want to put in a significant amount of money. You know, 3/4 pot, I'd say, is a significant amount of money. It's not like there was a raise, but, you know, the nut flush draw made trips on the turn. So, you know, that's something to kind of be aware of. If the ace wasn't of the suit, if the ace was of the suit, right? If it was a spade and then the offsuit card was like the 10 or the 7, people are maybe a little less likely to have the trips because they're not going to have that top pair with the nut flush draw so much. And here I'll fold. Yeah, I mean, this is just this is a hand that looks much prettier than it plays. That's yeah, we're gonna write that down and put it in a book sometime. Uh, maybe write a PLO book at some point. Once you know I'm like legit good at the game instead of just capable of beating good games for money because it's like not that hard because people just like to put money in pots in PLO, often in uncanny and inadvisable ways. All right, let's see. We have another comment. Long time. Ah, yes. Yes, long-time casual poker player who is trying to get more serious about their game. And yeah, I'm providing some learning materials and you know advice and whatnot along the way, and probably will show up on their stream at some point, and vice versa. But I think I'm not personally ready for guests in my my PLO journey. I mostly am trying to establish you know, some good habits. Here now I'm more tempted to raise. I mean, the 2 is a pretty bad card. Ace 2, 6, 9. This player is limping a lot. I think having a nut suit, the ranks of the cards, maybe this is bad. Like, again, prettier than it plays. But I am the button. I think over limping actually might be the play here. If I'm going to have an over limping range, this hand probably fits well into it because I'm kind of just trying to smash a flop. And truthfully, I'm going to miss a lot of flops, right? There's going to be a lot of flops that I'm just like, this player's going to call. And like this one, no, that's a pretty good flop, right? Top and bottom pair, backdoor nut flush draw, backdoor straight draw. Those are things not to ignore. Also, I'm going to have all the ace-ace in my range. My opponents should rarely have ace-ace. It's possible, but it's very unlikely. So I should be able to play more aggressively because my opponents should theoretically be scared of my range. This person's leading out into the pre-flop raiser on an ace-8 deuce board, which generally is probably not super recommendable. I just feel like they have middle set here, like a ton. And my hand's not very good against middle set. I do have some, you know, adventurous ways of going about things. I'm going to actually fold and mark this hand, but I'm going to mark it a couple ways. We'll wait for this to be over. Why isn't... Oh, dear. Okay, yeah. It looks like it was not functioning totally properly. I'm feeling like I've got some lag with the site. This is not a good sign. It would be nice if they dealt me another hand. Let's see. I'm popping this up in order to see Oh, yeah, okay. I wonder if that's an ignition thing. That's a my connection thing. Let me know if there was any issues in the stream there. Oh, yeah. The deuce is a bad card. So we'll we'll go with that. The deuce is a bad card. Having, a suited 10 with a card that connects is nice, but really just like anything besides a deuce there, and I might play it. We're going to hit that for review, but also that one, that's going to be a hand where I want to see, because I feel like they very often are going to have just like that set of eights. It just screams set of eights to me for some reason. They can have some flush draws, but like it's a really weird spot to just lead with the flush draw. And if they have top pair and 3 random cards, they've got 9 outs to beat my top and bottom, because my deuce, everything in their hand is going to be an overcard to a deuce. Okay, so this hand bears some speaking about. With any of the other cards suited, I would fold, but with the suited ace, I think it's worth playing. I flop the nut flush draw. In this spot, I'm not generally going to do a lot of betting. Basically meaning I've raised, I'm in a multi-way pot, and the board comes this sort of texture. This isn't really a fantastic texture for the pre-flop raiser, right? I can have some top 2 pair, top set type stuff, and I have a pretty strong hand here with a pair and nut flush draw. I am going to check and definitely call a bet. I think this opponent in the cutoff now is going to bet like often, and I think I need to get in the habit of taking a note on every player, so this is just super easy call, right? Getting a lot of value. I have bottom 2 pair now, and I'm gonna call again no matter what they bet. And there's a lot of straight draws and flush draw combo type things that they can have. So if the board bricks out, I mean, what is a brick though, right? But I've got a lot of potential equity here. A lot of cards that would give me a very strong hand on the river. This not really being one of them. If they have a hand like Queen Jack 10-9, it would be really nice of them to check it back. 9-7 got there. It didn't feel like a spot where I can rep that, right? And I did have that showdown value. I think the turn won the hand for me, because they probably had a straight draw and a pair, and I made the second pair, and of course I had all the spades, for the. So what did they have? So I was wrong. The turn did not win the hand for me. They had King Queen 5-3. So they had bottom pair like I did, with a king kicker and the second nut flush draw, and I had the nut flush draw and the ace kicker. So they were super dominated on the flop. They put in the money on the flop, put in the money on the turn. One thing is, if I bet the flop and then they raise, it's pretty uncomfortable. I think I'd basically calling anything, but now I'm building a really big pot without a super strong hand, and if they have something like a set, I basically just have a flush draw and some, runner boat outs. But the other thing is that if I bet flop, they call. I bet turn, they call. And then the river comes, and I'm like, do I turn this into a bluff? If I check now, I think they're more likely to bet than to have barreled off, if that makes sense, because of the way the board came out. It's a very awkward situation, and it's one of those things where, just being out of position, you don't get to be as aggressive as you get to be when you're in position, because you have to go first. You don't get to you can try to dictate the terms of what's going on, but you don't have as much information, and you can't actually control the situation in the same way, right? You can't say, oh, you checked, okay, I'm going to check back, let's see the next card, let's see a showdown, right? You don't have that control. All right, I'm not going to worry about this hand because I missed the beginning of it. I'm going to would you be happy with ace king on that hand, or are you thinking the river better had a boat? So general question or request, when referring to hands, if you can use like the 4 cards that were in my hand, then I can go back and look it up much more easily because I'm streaming with a delay. And also sometimes I'm just not going to see a comment immediately. So if you remember what my whole cards were, let me know. Oh, yeah. Okay, let's see. The 2 connects to the 6 barely. Would it be better or worse if the 6 was an 8? Oh, that's a good question. So the 2 connects to the 6, but the 2 connecting to the ace, this is, okay, I know which hand this is now. I will go and look at it on my thing so that, I believe the hand we're talking about was ace, 9, 6 deuce, right? Double suited. So the question is, would it be better if the 8, if the 6 were an 8, so like ace, 9, 8 deuce? Yes, for sure. A couple reasons. I mean, one, the 8's bigger than the 6, which is nice. The 6 connecting to the 2 isn't that useful. Yes, when the board comes 3, 4, 5, you have the second nut straight instead of the third nut straight. But the ace deuce, basically, when you have a 6 in your hand and ace deuce, I think the 6 neutralizes the connectivity of the ace and the deuce, right? The ace and the deuce are no longer connected in any relevant way because the 6 and the deuce are connected on the same boards, if that makes sense, right? Like ace deuce and deuce 6 make straights on the same boards. So you're never going to make a straight with ace deuce. So yeah, having an 8, you know, the difference between having the nuts, the second nuts or third nuts on 3, 4, 5 as a board is less than the difference between the number of straights. You can make 2 more straights, I believe, with 9, 8 compared to 9, 6. So yeah, let's take a flop. Oh, hey. All right, I guess I open limped, over limped. This is a spot. I think I should raise this, actually. I think this hand is decent enough. So I've got double gut shot, right? A queen gives me a king high straight, an 8 gives me a jack high straight. None of these things are to the nuts. I do have a pair, which has some nice blocking properties, but it's not the top pair. It's not that likely to be good. It could be. If nobody really wants to put money into this pot, I'm feeling pretty good about it. The ace is a very poor card. I'm going to check. But now if a queen comes, at least I have a way of making the nuts, I guess. Of course, nuts that everybody will be sharing. And I have 2 pairs, 10s and 7s. I'm going to check, and I think there's like a 50% chance I'm going to win. If I were to bet and get called, that chance would go down because they're going to fold most of the hands that I'm beating, except for like 6, 7, maybe. Ace, garbage, maybe. But mostly, I think if nobody's interested, I win, and if somebody's interested, I lose. And this person seems like kind of interested, so if they check, I think I'm probably going to lose. The ace 3 king deuce where and I'm going to win, right? Ship it. Okay. Where I flopped a flush draw and had bottom pair. Yeah, having bottom pair was good there. Like, it was definitely relevant to my flop decision. I probably check it without the bottom pair anyway, but the bottom pair gives me more resiliency in terms of when I call, I know I'm not just calling with the flush draw. I also know that it's less likely they have bottom set or top and bottom or bottom 2 pair, right? So I have that blocker. If that were the top pair, I think I bet there, right? So I think with top pair, I bet. Middle pair, maybe. Bottom pair felt like a hand where it's like, ooh, this is it's got robust equity, right? And they're double suited jacks on the button. Having jack high flush draws is really nice, right? Where we're going to have a shorter handed pot, maybe heads up, maximum 3 ways. We're playing 3-handed right now. I think this particular 3-handed game looks like a really good game to play 3-handed. If there's a limp here, I'm actually going to raise because jack, 9, 8 with tri-suit, it's not the best hand, but it's pretty good against a limper. And here, I'm blocking top set. I'm not blocking any of the straights or the flush draws. I have jacks. I think I will put in a half pot bet. I probably, maybe a third is better. I don't know. This is kind of a sort of let's get to the river bet, or you fold like your ace, king, queen cards. And if you have one pair, just like don't win the pot with decent amount of equity. Like they probably had 30-40% equity pretty easily, even with very weak hands. But a lot of those are going to be hard hands they're going to be continue with. Now we're playing heads up PLO, which I have very little experience at. So, and at some point I thought, yeah, why don't I try and learn to play this game for real? I think I'm probably going to wrap the session if this table breaks, and then we'll go to the review. I think we might have some lengthier things to discuss in the review today. All right, so straight gets there, yes, but only one straight. They need exactly 7-8, right? I have an 8, that's great. I have the nut flush draw, also great. I have aces, pretty cool. Let's bet half pot. You know, I don't think I really want to be going bigger here. Maybe with the 8 blocker. Now there's a lot of straights, right? Jack 8 got there. King Jack got there. I'm blocking 7-8. I'm blocking King Jack. But it's really easy for them to have 2 pair. This isn't a player that I'm thinking, ooh, I want to get this guy to fold, 2 pair. So I have the nut 1 pair. Let's check it back. Lose to top set. Wow. They could have put some more money in the That's cool. That's cool. Okay, so they're really passive. And here I've got a wrap. Let's bet. It's not a great wrap, right? It's what I sometimes refer to as the diaper, where it's the under wrap. The 7 means that an 8 also gives us a nut straight. An ace would give us a nut straight, and the 9 would give us a nut straight. A bunch of other things give us a second nut straight, which is not as good. But yeah, so the heads up is going to be pretty much just focusing straight up on the hands in question. Nobody else is playing any hands. And if I fold, I get a new hand. King, Queen, Deuce, really bad flop for Ace 7, 7, 6. I want some sort of board interactivity. I at least want to be blocking something. Also, this player's played very passively so far. So I'm quite happy to just be like, yeah, let's just, maybe my 7s are good. Maybe I get a free 7. Maybe I hit an ace. I did get a free 7. I'm going to bet. I don't think they have that much in their hand. You know what? They can have like kings up. They can have a lot of good hands here because we've seen them play so passively with top set. So I'm going to bet a little bit more than I would have against somebody who I really thought couldn't possibly have anything. I'm also rarely betting less than half pot in position on the river. I think in general, those smaller bet sizes play better out of position. In position, you have the value of taking the check back. So, do I raise? Okay, I'll just check. I think raising here would be eminently reasonable, and there's probably some value to be had. The fact that the rake is as bad as it is, like, maybe we basically want to play a little bit more passively and find situations where we can just be super dominating them, because getting money in with a small edge is worth a lot less here. So somehow I don't have a straight. I need a deuce or a 7 to fill it out. I do have a pair of 4s, which, like, is no good. But could have been. I mean, they made no indication that they had anything interesting. This is a pretty bad hand, but I don't think it's bottom like 20%. Heads up PLO, I believe you're supposed to play in the vicinity of 80% of your hands on the button. So that's it for this table session. And we'll head to the review now. All right, now we're ready for a session review. I have marked 4 hands only today, and a couple of them are pre-flop spots, and some of them are, post-flop. Okay, so ace, deuce, 9, 6. Am I going to raise this on the button, right? So there's a limper. When there's a limper, I think I should be thinking, would I raise this hand in their position? Now, there's a lot more subtleties, but I think generally speaking, that's a good default, right? The looser they are, probably the wider I can raise, the closer to my regular opening range I can raise, and the tighter they are, the more I want to think more about like what I might cold call with against a raise, because their range is going to be stronger than most limper ranges. But so here I'm going to look at, first of all, on the button, do I play this hand? Like, I'm pretty sure, but yeah, button raise first in, ace with, yeah, so if you're double suited with 2 of these like middling cards, anything from a 6 to a 9, if you have a double suited ace with anything from a 6 to a 9, you're playing all of those hands, right? The only double suited aces you're folding are hands like ace 4 9 deuce. So if we make this 6 a 4, which interestingly almost makes it feel like there's more connectivity, because 4 2 1, right? That actually is a fold, but there's very few hands. Basically, on the button, double suited ace, you could probably play it, right? And if you played 100% of those, I don't think you'd really get yourself into trouble. So given that, like, this raise can't be that bad for sure, right? But let's look at the cutoff raise with ace X hands, and just glancing at it quickly, it looks to me like, yeah, this is probably a fold, right? Like ace 8 7 deuce, it says is the worst hand of this type, and I think ace 9 6 deuce is clearly worse than that. I would rather have 8 7 than 9 6, right? The 9's higher than the 8, but the 8 7 is a true connector, and the 6 connecting to the 2 here, as discussed, isn't that helpful really. So I do think for sure this is a spot where I wouldn't want to open this in the cutoff, but let's backtrack a little. I want to open it in the button. I don't want to open it in the cutoff. Let's look at this player. 43% of their hands they're playing, 4% they're raising. So against this player, I think playing it is reasonable. It's maybe a little loose, but I think it's okay. All right, so here I do raise. I get the cold caller from the small blind, and of course the limper comes along. I flop top and bottom pair, and they just lead out. Like, this is weird, right? They probably shouldn't be betting a lot of hands here. They should expect me to be betting a fair amount. That's not to say they necessarily shouldn't have a leading range. They're betting 3/4 pot, which we've seen them do before. Is this 3/4 pot? 350 times? Yeah, it's probably 3/4 pot of what the pot was when the rake was taken, which I think Poker Tracker is not showing us the rake taken. So, how do we study this situation, right? It's hard to really nail down ranges in Pot Limit Omaha because there's so many combinations. In Hold'em, you can say, well, I think they're going to play, 15 combos of this way, 9 combos of this way, and then they have 3 combos of pocket eights, but I think they'll only do this half the time, so that's 1.5 combos, stuff like that. We can really nail it down. In PLO, we can't do it quite like that. So that raises the question, how do we do it, right? And that's tricky. What I'm going to do is, let me see. I'm gonna try this equity calculator. We're gonna see how this plays out. Now, this text might be super tiny on your screen, and if so, apologies. Where do I want to put this? I'm gonna put this here, even though it's blocking what they have. Okay, so first let's see, against 2 random hands, we should have a lot of equity. Yeah, we've got more than 50% equity, 54% equity against 2 random hands. Do our opponents have 2 random hands? No, they do not, right? First things first, let's see what happens if, say, this first person has 40%. What? Why doesn't that... Something weird happen. Okay, I'm going to try that again. Something definitely weird happened. Okay. So this is a little bit of a new tool to me, and learning to use new tools is like one of the most important skills you can have in... So I can't put in 40%? Let's see. Select single range selector, multiple range selector, random. Okay. Let's try this. Oh, this is Omaha. Oh, interesting. Ooh, I like this. So this is going to be useful in the future. And, now too, right? So we'll say top 43% of hands for this one player, which is, just because their VPIP's 43 doesn't mean they're playing top 43% of hands. They probably aren't playing aces this way. Maybe they are. I don't know. We don't know. But we're just going to go with this for now for them. And then the other player we'll say, what are they doing? Like, they're not going to have all of these things. Let's say they're playing more like 20% against a raise. Is this all pre-flop? This is all pre-flop, right? All right, but against this, let's just see, like, broadly speaking. So even when we narrow down their ranges, we still have really good equity, right? But let's go back to the actual decision point. There's a fold now, right? So we'll pop it up again. And, this is the learning with me, as in I am learning while you are hopefully also learning, section of this, this series, where we're basically trying to learn a new piece of software and see, what we can get out of it. So we will, let's create that range. We'll see that our equity against, like, their whole range is really good, but they're going to be betting specific things. So what is multiple range selector? Oh, okay. So we can make multiple ranges. Yeah, interesting. All right, so this might not be, I'm probably going to, oh, any pairs? It feels like this is really just giving us, okay, like for pre-flop hands, enter hand descriptions, for example, okay, ace suited, king suited, okay. So I think the syntax is similar to some other programs. And what we're going to do with this is, instead of here, first let's look at, like, what's our range against 8-8, right? And then this should be with any valid description, 4-card hands. Oh, so we can't just give 8-8. That's unfortunate. Let's go clubs and spades. And then can we give asterisk asterisk? No. All right, let's go back to the syntax. Single range selector. We'll go to this. All right, and then manual range. Or 4-card exact hands. All right, so far it looks like there's not as much functionality as I'd like there to be, but we'll mess around with it a little bit. We'll say they have some. We should give them something that they might actually have, right? And 5 clubs. Was there spades on board? No. Okay, so no suits. They have a set. And we just want to see, like, what's our range against a set? It's going to be very poor. We're going to have 2 aces, backdoor straight, backdoor flush draws. So the aces are going to be worth around... Oh, they're blocking a lot of our backdoor straight. The aces is 2 outs. The backdoor flush is usually an out and a half. This backdoor straight can be about an out here. It's probably more like half. We probably have, that all adds up to like 4 outs. 4 outs twice, I think, is going to be in the teens in terms of percentage. Yeah, so 17.68. So not great against a hand like that. Now, does that tell us anything about how we play this exact hand? No, it tells us that we're crushed by middle set, which is like, yeah, okay, great, thanks. It tells us we're a little less crushed than we might be otherwise. I'm going to copy that, and we're going to come back to that later. We're going to add in a different hand here, where we're going to say, like, ace of hearts, king of diamonds, queen of diamonds, 10 of spades. And now we're going to see how we're doing against this. Well, we have top and bottom pair, right? So we got to be doing pretty well. Well, they have a flush draw, backdoor straight draw, and 9 outs to make a better 2 pair. And all of those outs would lock out any of our 2 pairs. We'd basically just need a deuce, right? Or some kind of, we can have a runner. I gave them the ace of hearts. They can't have the ace of hearts. Let's get rid of that. Ace of clubs, sure. And What do I think our equity is going to be with the best hand in this spot? I think it's gonna be less than 50%. Just like ballparking it, I think it's in the low 40s. If we think about their outs, they've got 9 outs, really 8 because the 10 of diamonds is like a double out, right? So 8 outs plus for their flush draw, they had 9 outs. So that's 17 outs twice. Like, wow. I think low 40s is too high. I think we've got more like, I'm going to say like 38% equity, maybe 36% equity, right? Okay. So that's the thing. We have to look at this and go, okay, if they have a good hand that we're ahead of right now, we're actually still a dog. So this kind of reinforces to me like, yeah, maybe folding is the play. Let's take away their flush draw, and I think now we're going to be a favorite, but they're going to have 9 outs twice. So, oh, and an 8 is an out as well, right? That would counterfeit us. So that's like 12 outs and then 50. Yeah, I think this is going to be closer to 50-50. Yeah, we have 53, they have 47. So this is like kind of the best case scenario, I think. We're flipping. And the bad scenarios, let me see if we put a comma. Oh. If this is going to work. We'll see. Yeah, it does. Okay, so if half the time they had that big draw, not even a big draw, half the time they have like a hand that we're ahead of, and half the time they have a set, we're getting correct odds right away. But I think we're mostly going to have reverse implied odds unless we like somehow backdoor a flush on something that runners them a straight, right? So that's a very interesting tool. We're going to use it more in the future. I don't want to get too deep into it today. I want to try and brush up on the syntax a little bit, get better at it. But here, I like my fold now, right? I mean, crushed by a set of 8s, losing pretty badly to an ace and a flush draw. Against just like a bare flush draw, we're doing okay. If they have an 8 and a flush draw, they might be doing even better than if they have an ace and a flush draw. It's at least going to be ballpark similar, right? And we're not even like obliterating just like a random ace XXX hand. So I like the fold. And I was definitely going to bet if it checked to me, right? But when they bet, it's like, oh, hey, there's some new information here. Okay, let's see. We have a comment. We'll get back to that. Do you know much about how Poker Tracker decides where each hand falls in terms of what is 10%? And do you think they're always right? Second question, do I think they're always right? No. And the first, which is a little odd because the first question, I don't know. I don't know exactly how they decide. My guess is they probably do it based on like raw equity. Like Poker Stove, which I don't think people use much anymore, but it was kind of like the proto version of it's like the early equity calculator that many of us used for countless hours. It ranked hands, if you just went by percentage, it ranked them in how good they were against a random range, which doesn't really tell you how good the hand is overall, like where it should rank, because your opponent's range usually isn't a random range. So my guess is they're probably doing something like that here. And if they are, then when you type in 10%, you're not going to be getting the 10% that they're likely playing. And you're certainly probably not going to be getting the 10% they should be playing. It's possible they use rankings from like some solver, and that would, I would say, probably be an improvement. And so I wouldn't say that they're always right, but I'd say that they're closer to right. And so, yeah, I'd say be very careful with those percentages. Let them be sort of a vague, you're getting a sense of something, but not, don't regard it as like a very accurate data point. Regard it as a way of kind of getting a ballpark-ish that you hold loosely. But, I'd rather know that I have 40% against a 10% range than thinking I have 60% or just having no idea, right? Or seeing, hey, my equity against a 70% or against a random hand is somehow like 48%, and against the 10% range it's 44%, so like it didn't change that much. I think there's value there, but again, we always have to be careful, like how much emphasis, how much value are we placing on one point of data. Back to, that was about where you had two pair but the ace erased your pair. Oh yeah, okay. Right. So the board must have paired. It was like, I think it was like ace 10-7 or something, and I had 10-7 or whatever, and then the ace paired, and so all of a sudden my bottom two pair was worthless. And would I have felt, the question then is, would I be happy with ace king on that hand? Oh, against that player, I would have been conflicted. I think it's interesting, you know. I think we've seen that player be fairly passive, so I think they can have boats that we feel like they shouldn't have, and I think I probably would have folded ace king. But without going back to the hand itself, hard to say. But it's a good question, right? I mean, it's a spot where you definitely want to ask yourself that question, and it's hard to come up with a firm answer. But often just knowing what the right questions are is, it's the first step, right? Like, yeah, so good question. Jack 9 tray. Okay, we folded this in the cutoff, and the question is, do I open this on the button? And do I open it in the cutoff? I'm pretty sure I don't. We'll look at button first. Single suited jacks, Jack 3 deuce, 3 jacks with a suited ace. So single suited jacks we're opening 92% of. And I'd say having the 9 here makes this clearly in the top 93%, I'd say, 92%, whatever, of suited jacks. So I'm going to say yes, clear open on the button. But looking at that data point anyway, I'm going to say probably folding it in the cutoff. So cutoff, double suited jacks. Yeah, now it's only like 65%. So like, if we have jacks, and sorry, single suited, we're playing almost all of our double suited jacks. We want the cards to do something. But so here, single suited jacks, we want the other two cards to both be useful, is kind of my takeaway. So having the tray here means put it on a tray and ship it back to the lunch counter. I don't know. It's garbage. And the cutoff, fold it. So I'm happy with that fold. Next hand, Jack 7-4. Okay, so this, there's a limper, right? This hand was not so much a specific, is this a specific open raise hand, because we can't open raise, there's a limper, and there's a post behind us, but it's kind of, where does this fit in the scheme? This hand looks exactly like the type of hand that is a sort of cutoff hand, right? It's a cusp hand for open raising in the cutoff. And, you know, if we look at the hijack, like, well, the hijack, we don't want to RFI this, right? It's like Jack 8-7 with single suit we want to play. So the 4 is clearly worse than the 8. So we don't want to play it in that case. The reason we might play it here in this very specific scenario is I would maybe play it for an overlimp, because we might get this like 5-way big pot where the big blind's loose. We're, you know, deep enough with them. I think there's potential here in this hand to win a big pot basically by spiking a set of jacks. Our jack high flush draw, not very valuable in a multi-way pot. Our you know, potential straights, like with a jack and a 7, is going to be pretty vulnerable, because queen jack will always make a bigger straight when Jack 7 makes a straight. And 7-4, it's like, yeah, it could come 6-5-3, but like that's one flop. And that's one board, right? So I think I'm fine with this as a fold, but I could see it as an overlimp, especially if I had more data on the two players behind me. If that data was like, yeah, these players are not very aggressive, you can probably overlimp and see a cheap flop and potentially stack someone with a set of jacks, like set over set someone, right? So in a tough game, I think this is definitely the right play, the fold. But this game, not super tough, and I think you could probably get away with an overlimp, but like, it's marginal. Okay, this is like the big hand from the session, really. it was, we'll get into each decision point, even though I went over it pretty in depth right at the beginning of the session. But the idea was I'm marking this hand so I can review it later, so I don't have to stress out about like, ooh, did I make a bad play here? You know, we don't really want to be second guessing ourselves. We want to be reanalyzing reads, right? Being like, oh, I thought this player was like this, but now I see them do this. I'm going to recalibrate how I think about how they play. But we don't want to be second guessing like our whole, like our core, right? Like how our game is built. We want to kind of rebuild and tweak things, you know, after we land the ship, basically, right? Like we're not doing repairs while we're in flight. We're going to land the ship and then we're going to fix whatever needs to be fixed. You know, whereas if something's going way off the rails, then okay, then emergency landing. But not the case here. Okay, so we have a limper, and now it's to me, and I have kings with a 9 and a 4. So the first step, I think, is like figure out where does this fit in. I think raising is probably just generally fine because I'm going to get money in the pot with a hand that can flop pretty good. Or can flop huge, but really there's not a lot of huge flops for it when you think about it, right? But against this player who I want to play hands with. But this was early in the session, so, you know, we don't have that much of a read on this player. Over time, it's like, oh yeah, I definitely want to raise this against who I found out that player was. But, you know, the default, I think, should be, like, not the default, but, like, one data point, one thing we think of is, like, what would I do with this hand if I were in that player's position when they open limped, right? And, you know, the answer is, I don't know. We want to play 78% of our single suited kings, which is not all of them. King 5 deuce with a suit, King 5 4. Basically, we want the other two cards to do a thing. And here I'd say like the 9 is not really doing a thing. Or rather the 4 is not doing a thing. Sorry, the 9's like barely stretching to make a weak straight with the king. So I think this is a, you know, it's a hand that's on the cusp. And I want to go back, and there was a hand, I think just before this, I had King Jack tray, and I folded it, and I'm going to pop that up. What was it? There's a call, a raise. Oh, I folded in some other position to a raise. Okay, pretty different hand. Let's not worry about that. But, you know, is King Jack 3 that much different than King 9 4? I think it's actually better, because King Jack is better than King 9, and the 4 and the 3 are both kind of irrelevant cards. So I think folding this might have been fine. But I raise, and I don't think that could be terrible, right? There's only one player behind me. I have a loose passive in the pot. And maybe folding's terrible. I don't know, but it seems okay. All right, so we end up getting a 4-way pot. Nice, right? Flop comes top set, second nut flush draw. So we know we're drawing to the nuts with an ace of clubs, because we'd be blocking the royal, and we'd have the king high flush, which with the ace high, we have an ace high flush, but, you know, we have the nuts. Obviously, a king is the stone cold nuts, but a jack or a 10 are the effective nuts, right? It's the big house, and any running pair gives us the big house, so, or the nut house, depending on how you want to call it. Except for running aces, that's not the nut house, that's the underfold, but whatever. Top set, very big draw, and then second nut flush draw, a little more tenuous, right? So, ace queen, there's 16 ways to make ace queen. There's 4 aces and there's 4 queens. You can put those together, make 16 ways of making ace queen and flopping the stone cold nuts on this player on this board. And I have 3 players in against me, and they have a total of 12 cards. So the chances of someone having ace queen is like kind of uncomfortably high. So when it checks to me, if I go ahead and bet, then I'm often going to get raised by a hand like ace queen. And if they have ace queen with a nut flush draw, I think I'm in pretty bad shape. However, if they have ace queen with like something else, then I think I'm a favorite. So I kind of maybe like just trying to build a big pot and get it in. Let's look at the stack to pot ratio. That's something I haven't talked about a whole lot, but the stack to pot ratio is the ratio between the effective stack, right? So the stack size that matters, which here against two of my opponents would be $93.50. That's my stack, and two of them cover me. But against one of them, it would be $18.50, right? Against the person on the bottom, player number 3 down here. So against that person, the stack to pot ratio is 1-to-1, basically, right? They have the same money in their stack that's in the pot, roughly. So one pot size bet, boom, we're done. Against them, like, bet, just get the chips in, let's go, right? But against the other players, I need to divide my stack by this 19 in the middle, which yields roughly 5-to-1. So with 5-to-1, what that means is if I go pot and then they go repot, then there's still a little bit of money left behind. So we want to be a little more careful with a higher stack to pot ratio. Now 5 isn't very high. So I think this is a spot where honestly, I probably should look at this and be like, all right, let's go. I've got top set, second nut flush draw. Let's just get the money in. And I don't do that. I check because I think, well, I'm probably going to check a lot on this flop. But like I smashed it, you know, and while somebody can have the nuts, I'm blocking the second nuts. That's kind of nice, not that helpful. If my 9 were a queen, I would have been more likely to just go, because also then I'd have an open ender. You know, if an ace comes, I now have the Broadway for the nuts as well. But yeah, this is, I think I should have bet here. I was just kind of a little too worried about like how future streets are going to play, but I think I just have I have a lot of equity. And now they bet 16, right? And it goes fold. And I call, which, you know, I'm not folding, right? I have top set and this second nut flush draw. Even if the second nut flush draw isn't good, even if I make the second nuts, even if that isn't good, having those two clubs in my hands blocks the nut flush, and you know, it blocks a nut flush draw, and there's a chance that it's good, right? So what I do here, I call, but I want to look first what I did. Oh, Edison, hey, what is up? I am a big potato boy. Welcome to the stream. I'm streaming with delay, and I'm gonna type something in the chat. What's up? Streaming with delay. So I'm talking in 3 minutes. Yeah, anyway, Edison's a poker friend and a friend, a musician friend. Anyway, thanks for joining, and we're going over some PLO hands that I just played. This being one of the first hands, and spoiler alert, least fun. But I think there's some stuff to be gained here. So what I want to do is I want to look at, like, what's my equity against, let's say they just have a bare ace queen, right? And the trouble here, I think this isn't the best piece of software to use for it. Should I go ahead and use the other one? I probably should. All right, since I don't know how to use this as well as I want, I am going to switch to Pro Poker Tools, and we will do that for the rest of the session. First, let's just talk about, so the flop, I think I probably should just check raise. I wouldn't quite get it in, but it would be like 60, 70-ish, and then there just wouldn't be that much money left. We'd put it in on the turn. But I called, I check, again, I'm going to call the turn, but there's going to be this awkward like $24 left on the river. So do I just jam the turn when my opponent's going to have a lot of nut straights? I don't know. It's a very unpleasant spot, but even on the turn, I'm going to have really good equity. They check it back, and the river's a 3 of clubs. And I do think betting something like $5 or $10 here to try to get value from like queen high flushes. Maybe they have something like queen 9 with the queen high clubs. Maybe they even have a smaller set, or actually any straight, right? Ace queen, queen 9. Ace queen they shouldn't have because they check back the turn. So I'm not going to really consider that too much. But mostly smaller flushes. Having the 10 and the jack on the board means there are probably fewer small flushes in their range because they can't have the jack high, they can't have the 10 high, whereas hands like 6 high and 5 high are less likely in general. Actually, yeah. So, and, I have the 4, so I'm blocking a lot of these small flushes as well. So that's kind of not ideal. But if I make that kind of blocker bet, you know, if they have the nuts, they're still going to call. They're still going to raise, and then I have a decision. I think I can probably make the blocker bet and then have a safe fold, because I just don't think people in this game very often are going to put the pressure with a nut blocker with the ace of clubs. And similarly, here's a thing that I really didn't think about but should have, is on the flop, they bet into 3 people. Are they doing that with the ace of clubs? Or are they doing that with the ace of clubs and another club? I think much more the latter, right? I don't think they're making this bet all that often with just the nut blocker. It wasn't a heads up pot, right? You know, and if they had that ace of clubs, like, shouldn't they have had like a queen to go with it if they were going to play it that way? So I think really I can discount the naked ace of clubs, and I don't have to worry about getting bluffed by it. And so I should put a small bet out here to try and get value from a weaker flush, but instead I check, and then they bet 3/4. 3/4 I think is a very value heavy bet. You know, it's just, I think I probably should have folded for this. I felt like I had under-repped my hand so much. The set of kings is now irrelevant, though. So, you know, this bet size, it's like they're trying to get value from, maybe I have a straight, maybe I have a smaller flush. But, you know, sometimes people just go pot. If they have the nut blocker, I feel like they just put the biggest bet out there. But also just, I don't think on the flop they bet the naked ace that much. And if they do, it's usually because they have the queen. And if they have the queen, they usually bet the turn. So I think I can fold here. I didn't fold. I called. They had ace 7/7 tray. And I'll pop this thing up first. Launch equity calculator. Okay, so here we see my hand, their hand, and on the river, oh, they've got 100% equity because the hand's over. But let's see on the flop. On the flop, I think I'm going to have a substantial edge, right? Because, I mean, there's only 7 clubs that can come, and then I also can make a boat. So 7 outs would be somewhere in the like 28, 30 some ish percent equity, but I can make a boat, so I take out, what, like 20% of that or so, I think. What, 20% and 30%? I'm going to say they have only around 25% equity, maybe even a little, yeah, 23.4. So getting it in against this on the flop would have been, you know, beautiful. If we give them the queen of hearts instead, so now they've got the nut flush draw and the nuts, it's going to change. Basically, at this point, I just have a boat draw. And with the boat draw, I think I should have around 35-ish% equity, right? What do I have? 7 and 10, 17. Yeah, so I think I have somewhere around 35, 30 something for sure, 36.7. Yeah, so this is like worst case scenario, basically. I mean, worst case scenario, they would like have a set with this and then they'd be blocking a bunch of my outs. But since even against the nuts with the flush draw, I'm like not doing that bad. I think just piling money in on the flop, and then let's say they only had the nuts against the stone cold nuts. I've got so much equity here. What are we looking at? I've got top set. I've got the flush draw. So I've got like 17 to the boat. Really, it's like 8.5 plus another 7 or 8. 15. I think I've got like 60. Do I have like 60% ish? 63%, right? So they can have the nuts, and I'm a favorite. So I was way too afraid on the flop of them having the nuts plus the nut flush draw. And I shouldn't have even been that afraid, because that's not such a disaster to get it in against. So I'm very unsatisfied with how I played this hand, but I'm very satisfied with the lessons that I was able to take away from it. And, you know, that's how we become better players. As we look at situations, we say, this one didn't feel right. And I'm going to close the equity calculator now, and we're going to go back and look pre-flop. I think I can fold this, but I think raising it is okay-ish. I get a big multi-way pot, and the first thing I need to notice, first of all, I smash the flop, but second of all, the stack to pot ratio is rather low, right? It's only about 5 with my two main opponents, and it's only 1 versus the other person, which I'm thrilled to get the money in against. But looking at this and going like, oh, you know, I'm a favorite against the nuts. I'm like a substantial favorite against the nuts. So let's just pile the money in, because somebody has the nuts, they're going to raise me, and they're not always going to have the nut flush draw to go with it. And so when they bet, like, this is just a great spot to just pile it in and be like, okay, let's go, let's run it. And, you know, then I would have lost all my money because they probably would have gotten it in. They might have folded. They probably would have gotten it in. And if they get it in, you know, then they still hit this and I lose more money, but that's fine. I would have gotten my money in quite good, you know, against this exact hand. So where are we? The very last thing I'll do is I'm going to bring over Pro Poker Tools. And we're just going to pop this up. And like so. And this is a free website, propokertools.com. You can run equities. The board was King of Spades, Jack of Clubs, 10 of Clubs. My hand was King of Clubs, 4 of Clubs, King of doesn't matter, and 9 of doesn't matter. Okay. What do I want to look at? So now I'm just going to put an ace queen and just say, what if they have the nuts and I have no idea what else they have? Let's see. Let's see what happens. So they could have the nut flush draw now, right? They could have the nut flush draw. I have 59% against the full range of ace queen. And then let's see, what if they're blocking some of my outs? Okay, I'm still a big favorite. You know, if they have this, then I'm hosed, right? But if they just have, you know, just random nut flush draw, and like if they have the nut flush draw and the nuts, I'm not thrilled to be getting it in. But as we can see from this one down here, just all of their ace queen collectively, I'm doing well against. I'm ahead of it. So it's one of those spots where I think you need to look at the flop, think about the opponent's range, and go like, let's look at the flop, because I think that was the most important decision. I think my turn and river thought processes were a little off, but I think the flop is really where the money's made and lost. And just looking at this going like, yeah, okay, you can have ace queen all day long, but, you know, I've got top set, I've got the nut house draw and the second nut flush draw. And so unless you have ace queen with clubs, like, let's go. And they just don't have ace queen with clubs often enough. There's probably some other ways of looking at that range a little more subtly, but we'll leave that for another day. I'm going to wrap it up here. Thanks for joining me on this step of this journey. There will be a lot more to come. If you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. It's super helpful. I'm trying to build a channel. Right now, it's at very, very little infancy, but all support is always appreciated. Thanks, and have a good day.